Alrighty, what's up, everybody? My name's Chance, and welcome back to the 8th week of the FNM podcast. With me this week, MTG Jeff does return, and as
What's
always,
up?
HGG is with us.
Mahala.
This week, we're going to be talking about this most recent Players Tour Online event. I believe it was the fourth one. We had a whole lot of Reclamation, but we also had some pretty interesting decks that spiked up through the ranks and actually ended up doing pretty well against Reclamation. So, Jeff, you want to take over on the first one?
Oh boy, do I. Which one was the Team of Reclamation? Yeah, honestly, there's so much news to cover for this week. I'm really excited to be jumping into everything. We got some spoiler stuff about Zendikar. We have the Tour Players Finals deck list, everything like that. We will touch a little bit on some of the physical product stuff, but we are MTG Arena players. We're going to focus a little bit more on MTG Arena and everything like that. So yeah, so jumping into some of the deck lists. I mean, Team of Reclamation. Honestly, I feel like when it comes to this, Team of Reclamation and four-color Team of Reclamation are basically the same deck. There was a bunch of Team of Reclamation that was in there, or four-color. The biggest difference is four-color brought in white, and they added in basically Dovin's Veto to be able to interact better against the other Teamer Reclamation decks, as well as like whatever else was out there. Bringing in Teferi and then also Kenrith. Those were like the main pieces. They were able to bring in some like Deafening Clarions, Solar Blazes, things like that from the sideboard to play a little bit better against aggro. At the same time, though, like Team of Reclamation still does okay against aggro with Storm's Wrath, that kind of stuff. So the biggest difference is Team of Reclamation a little bit more consistent because they're not adding the fourth color. They're just going to play through consistently. We saw that in the gameplay that whenever there was matchups that I saw. I don't know about you guys, but I was able to catch in. Probably like, I think I watched about 6 to 8 hours between the 2 days of it all, and I was doing other stuff, but like it was just really fun gameplay. I love seeing pros play this stuff, and honestly, kind of surprised what decks some of the pros brought to it all. Like, I mean, we have our top 8 finish, but there was some janky stuff that was played there, and it was kind of fun, honestly.
Yeah. So question.
Yeah, go ahead.
What deck would you guys have brought, given your opportunity to be in the tour finals here? Would you have went with a safe bet of Reclamation, or would you, kind of went out on a limb and played something original just because, it was so constricted to being so much Reclamation?
Nah, yeah, probably just side with Reclamation or mono black aggro. Just take a safe bet.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't typically play Reclamation. At the same time, though, if I was coming to an event like this, I would probably spend 100 hours playing every one of the decks, something like that, so that I would, know how to play them all. And I probably would be more towards the Reclamation. Just, I mean, how it ran, how everything was. It's so versatile. It has a good win condition plan for it. At the same time, though, there were some pretty sweet decks that came in to counter the Reclamation decks, basically. Why don't you guys take away one of those?
Mono black is my favorite and one that I have most experience with. And now you just, again, are really relying on almost the lottery wheel of your opponent maybe not having, the petty theft opening hand, so you can get maybe a few swings in with that Regisaur. But you got to be quick to beat the Reclamation decks. Like, they're dropping that. Somehow it seems every game turn 4, it's like always in their hand, right? And then they just run away with it from there, value-wise, basically having 2 turns, and then they go up to 3 turns for every one of yours. So if you're going to beat it, it's got to be, in my opinion, with an incredibly heavy control deck that's just like you're not playing anything. Or just like that really, really quick aggro. But I think both are really risky and going to have a hard time getting it consistently with the percentages, because like the aggro might have that small percentage to win early on if they don't have the specific thing in their hand. And then these matches are traditional, so they get to sideboard for you, and then they get to mulligan based on the deck that you're playing to make sure that they have that answer, right? So that equation becomes pretty hard to get through consistently. It is possible. And the same thing on like the opposite pole, right? Where you've got the control deck, and yeah, you can potentially weave those perfect draws to get there. But again, they just have so much value throughout that mid part of the game that Oh, it might be difficult to get there consistently. And I think that's why we've seen so much reclamation in the
Yeah.
meta. And now,
So Riku, real quick. So with Mono Black Aggro, you talked about Regisaur. One of the interesting things, I watched a few matches with Riku, and it was one of the most surprising decks out there. He didn't bring in Regisaur. He didn't bring in that
wow.
typical aggro play. He actually brought in the Hunted Nightmare, which is a card that
Okay.
everyone kind of stopped playing. So yeah, and it's a card that it's a 3 mana 4/5 menace. When it enters the battlefield, there's a downside. Target opponent puts a death touch counter on creature they control. He was playing against 4 of these in the main board, which I obviously was a counter for the Reclamation decks. But instead of playing Rotting Regisaur, he brought this in, was swinging with a menace creature, which gets around all of the shark tokens. He was able to get around all this different stuff. It got away from the solar blazes that the 4-color Reclamation decks were playing. It got away from, he dodged with this. It was still big enough to dodge Storm's Wrath. And so this Hunted Nightmare actually carried him through this tournament. And I think it was just awesome. Like I was really loving watching him play this, and it was because it was a little bit different build than you typically see. You don't see people playing Hunted Nightmare ever, but in the meta, he knew what he was going up against, all that kind of stuff. He knew there's going to be lots of Reclamation out there, and I feel like it was a really calculated risk. But he brought in Hunted Nightmare over the Regisaur, which typically is played in that slot, and I actually really like that. I thought that was a powerful one, and honestly, again, the biggest downside of Hunted Nightmare is if other people are playing creatures, you have a downside on a 3 mana 4/5 body and everything like that. At the same time, though, with how much control is being played out there, all that kind of stuff, there's not always that much downside. If they don't even have creatures, there's no downside to this creature. It dodges all of the removal. It dodges all of the stuff. So I actually was really excited to see this guy play, and he performed really well during it. That was Riku's deck.
That's actually really cool that there's no Regisaur in there. Now that I've actually pulled the list up, I do see that he's running 4 Spawn of Mayhems. And now this is another card that has just performed so well recently. Even if you stack them, which is really, really nice. Rankle is great because it's got haste, but you're only playing one. The Spawn of Mayhem, it's normally coming out on turn 3 pretty consistently with this deck. And then being able to stack it and now doing 1 to 2 chip damage per turn plus the 2/4/4. So within 2 turns, you're doing 10 to 12 damage, right? So it's a lot, especially when you're combining it with things like Freebooter, which have flying as well, the Nightmare, which can grab Menace to go around things, and even like say the Blacklands Paragon being flashed in. So it's cool not to necessarily see Regisaur because he's a prime victim for Claim the Firstborn, which is probably
for sure.
Mono Black's biggest weakness right now.
So, Doctor, we also saw the Mardu Winota deck come back in this one and actually place in the top 8. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I like playing the lottery like anybody else. But the thing with Winota decks, you either hit or you don't, right? But you get so many looks that it doesn't actually feel like that much of a gamble as long as you're playing an efficient one and have the right split of humans and non-humans, right? And so I feel like that's where a lot of newer players sort of run into problems when they play Winota and they're like, oh, this is garbage or it's not that good. I feel like she's perfectly fine and she's good and the ability's strong if you have that aggro lineup. Early when Winota came out, people were about pulling out Agent of Treachery. And so when that got banned, people were still looking for bigger things to sort of pull out, I feel. And now this deck is sort of dialed it back and said, no, I'll just grab all the small but still heavy hitting humans and sort of play this. I don't want to call it mono white, but it reminds me of that because you have the Venerated Loxodon and Selfless Savior. But you also have things like Judith, to where even when your creatures are dying, you're still dealing damage. So it also reminds me of Rakdos, and it's like this.
Yeah, Judith was the card I felt like really carried this deck anytime I saw it play. And it's weird because I hadn't seen many people play Judith in this deck typically. It was one of those where like they had the Woe Strider, they had the Judith, so they had this whole like the typical Winota plan where you go all in. But if you didn't find that, you're making a wide board and Judith pumps everything up +1, and then you have kind of this like Mayhem Devil almost type of feel with Judith where you can just ping in for the last few points of damage. And so I feel like that was really where the power that we saw with this deck was, is that Judith let it carry through into a grindy matchup rather than, and like it was the versatility of being able to go aggro with you don't find Winota, being able to just chip in for last couple points of damage if you have a Woe Strider on the battlefield, that kind of thing. And so it was actually a really powerful deck when I saw it. Do you feel like it'll be seen if there's like another tournament soon, or is it one of those where like you bring it in as the surprise deck though? That's kind of the main question I feel like with this. Is this something that's actually good, or it was good for the meta?
That's kind of similarly the direction I was going in. We had talked a few weeks ago about the one-offs in decks and put them in and not and whatever. I just noticed this deck has 3, like not counting Gigantha of course, but 3 one-off cards. So I feel like it's a lot of the times with these sort of aggro decks that aren't as fast as your standard aggro decks, they are answer decks, and I'm sure that they knew, Team of Reclamation is going to be heavy. I need some way to either out aggro them, in which case you go, mono black, or I thought mono white aggro would do better, and I'm a little disappointed that it didn't. It did really good in the Red Bull Untapped tournament. Was it last month? So I'm guessing they just figured out what they needed as far as answers to get rid of it. But typically, I don't think a deck like this would fare better against faster aggro decks, but I also don't think it would fare better against slower decks if the meta wasn't where it is right now, where it's just like this person's trying to ramp up and gain control of the board, whereas this deck allows you to establish a board state very quickly while having alternative damage to send at their planeswalkers, at their face, at their other creatures, whatever. That's the nice thing about the Mayhem Devil and the Judith, is being able to like send damage elsewhere rather than just at the opponent's face.
Yeah.
So I think combo decks like this do better the less that are in the meta, right? If you see one deck, I think it's going to perform very well because people aren't as focused on beating it and sideboarding against it as decks that they're going to be facing more often. So I think it really comes down to what people decide, which is pretty cool, right? So people could choose to go full meta, right? Like we've seen, basically. And then that opens up people to try these combo decks and have a fighting chance to win the tournament with them, right? We've seen this get top 5, which is deadly. Or the majority of people is like, this combo's so strong, we're all running it. And then it's like a really, really easy sideboard option for everybody else, which is going to make it underperform.
But then people start having answers for it in the main board. I feel like with decks like this, if you're trying to have a meta breaker in any way, it's because you're wanting to win game 1. If you can win game 1 and then you have a decent shot on game 2, game 3, like that's the whole idea of these meta breaker type of decks, is that it's maybe not as strong of a strategy as just Wilderness Reclamation. Like there's a reason why those decks are good, is because they're going to be favored game 2, game 3, and that's a good strategy to go for. But the power of that game 1 win is really powerful, like that. And that's why these decks perform well and they're in the top 8, is because they got that game 1 win in the match, and then they were able to close out one of the other 2 games just by having a good enough strategy and doing it, performing well. That's kind of how these decks I feel like go with it, and kind of like what you're saying, where it's they have lots of one-offs, they have lots of things in the idea to make sure that they're really optimized for that game 1 before people bring in all the Deafening Clarions and Solar Blazes, Storm's Wrath, all those things that end up dealing with, or even like Aether Gusts that deal with Winota, Anyway, so I think this was a really powerful deck. It was definitely interesting to see it here, and kind of surprising that it got to the top 8. At the same time, though, it did all those things. If you run one of these kinds of decks, I think there was 2 to 3 players that ended up running a Mardu Winota deck. There wasn't a ton for each of these ones, but yeah. And we also had Jun's Sacrifice still show up into this one as well. A little bit different type of build than I typically see with this one. What do you guys think about the Jun's Sacrifice list by Christopher Larson with this one?
Just pulling up the list now, but in general, Jun's Sacrifice seems like very, very good. For example, I've seen Croakies played it into #1 Mythic. Totally standard list. Except for Stitcher Supplier and like the Dragon Skull Summits, the the old check lands. So
Right. Yeah.
it's just like it's crazy how well this list has been performing since its conception throughout literally the meta consistently in tier 1 until now, similar to Wilderness Reclamation. So like the deck is very good. It's a little grindy, but just the damage output is insane. If you can string together like a couple Mayhem Devils, and then not only does it have like the aggro effect off the start, it's got all the mid-range chip damage where they're just clawing you, chump blocking, but then we can pull out Bolus of Citadel, and now it's become a combo deck that can go absolutely nuclear. So this bad boy has got it all for me.
Yeah, Doctor, we were talking about this. It was like 4 or 5 weeks ago when we were talking about Bant Ramp and how oppressive Bant Ramp is. And the surprising thing is, no Bant Ramp in the top 8 here. And Bant Ramp was brought to the table. But this is what we were talking about. We said that Wilderness Reclamation was going to be something that was really powerful against it. And we see that Wilderness Reclamation just is a really powerful deck, and it is favored in that matchup. And then deck lists like this are going to be good if they have things like the Bullet Citadel. And so it's kind of cool. We did talk about this like 5 weeks ago, and it came to pass. The deck list needs the Bullet Citadel, something like that, to actually be able to compete against Wilderness Reclamation, where they need to be able to finish the game on one turn at times. Because like you were talking about, it does have the grindy value, it does have it work, but Wilderness Reclamation is going to outgrind just about anybody. That's what it does. At the same, so you have that game strategy, but I feel like the Bullet Citadel here is a big reason why this deck actually ends up having a win rate. Why it's posted in the top 8 here.
Yeah, and actually, just to put things in scope for everybody that's not like actively looking at the list as we are, there's 3 Reclamation decks in the top 5. There's 6 in the top 10. So 60%, like all the way across the top 10% or top 10 decks are just Teamer Reclamation, and all of these decks ended up with 10 victories. One of them had 11. So I'm not saying that it should immediately be banned, but I mean, we should at least get a week's notice, right?
Dude, yeah.
So maybe they let it pass in standard, I feel like, but historic, it's gonna be there. And do we want it to be there forever?
Well,
right. So I feel like maybe the standard ban can just like wait, not happen, but historic might need to be addressed.
well, that's the thing.
Let's have this conversation. All right. So what do you feel like it needs to be banned? First question. I feel like we all kind of agree on, at least on that point, but do you think they will, or how do you think they should go about doing it? Do we wait till rotation and then ban it across both formats?
No,
That's what I think might happen more. Like, that's what I believe is going to happen. Is I think they wait till rotation and then they ban it in both formats at once, rather than just in one or the other, which I think is dumb. I don't agree with, but yeah.
Yeah, you were talking earlier about how you were enjoying watching the matches and all that. I actually got the exact opposite effect from this Players Tour Online. It's like whenever Oko was out, I don't have any interest in seeing 8 matches of the same game. Even if I like support the players and I want to watch certain players, I'll watch that one person play one match. But then after that, if the rest of the tournament is 60% that, I just don't want to see that. I don't even want to play that,
That's true. I definitely tuned into the games where it was someone beating Reclamation with a different deck. Like that. Those are the games where I'm like, I always rooted for the deck that was against Reclamation. It's really true. Yeah.
Speaking of not watching the same match over and over, let's maybe shift away from Reclamation. Organic decks that still performed pretty good. Maybe Bant Ramp's not organic, but it was played a lot less. We've seen it hit 26 as a top finish. So that was played pretty well. But then Esper mid-range coming in not so bad, 7-7, 145th, which is way down in the list, but a really nice organic list there. And then I think we also had Esper Rats, which is that's borderline jank, and still, not the greatest finish at all, but it was there.
Dude, yeah, some of the decks that were brought to this were really, really fun and interesting. And real quick too, why we are talking about the meta, everything like that, I think it's important to kind of bring out some other things that are coming out right now as well, to kind of showcase why you should even care about playing good decks. So, I mean, first off, it's fun to play good decks. That's the first thing. But they have said now that if you finish in the top 1,200, you get qualified to enter into an event that if you then do perform well in that event, you can actually go into the world tour or whatever it is, like the actual like main events. So MTG Arena now has a path for qualification to the big leagues, basically.
Hasn't it always been that way?
They said that they're going to start it July 2020. So they've had this kind of announcement out for a little while that's the path they're going to do.
We've
the
had
biggest
mythic
difference
qualifiers.
is how you the biggest difference is how you can qualify just on MTG Arena, because everything is on Arena now, is basically what they're saying. So what happens is you if you're in the top 1,200 on any of these next 3 months, and then also it goes to like each month they requalify on the next set. But if you qualify during these next months, then you get put into an event where it's a 2-day event. You have to perform well for each one to go to the next day, and then the next day. If you perform well on the second day, you get invited to I forget what I was trying to look it up and I just didn't find it in time. But you get invited to a big event where you actually compete for money with everyone there. And yeah, they've always had something kind of similar to that. But like the biggest thing is you don't have to be a part of the MPL to be able to compete in the same competitions as MPL is in. And that's what this is allowing, is basically be in the top 1,200 in Mythic, and you will get entered into this event. And then they have a system set in place to where if you did well, like, so if you performed well in this day 2, you don't have to go through anything. You're automatically entered into day 2 of that same event on the next time. So I think they're doing it every three months or something like that, or every I can't remember everything. Sorry, I don't have all of the details. I'm trying to remember from when I read this like 3 days ago. So, and I can't find the article right now.
Yeah,
Previously,
yeah,
there's
we had
actually two
the,
sides.
previously we had the MCQ, which is just like the Mythic Championship qualifier, which was the same thing. If you finish top 1,200, you get your invite. You do well on day 1, you get to go to day 2. There's gem rewards for nice wins and finishes, right? And then if you win day 2, now you're entered in to come to the MIQ, right, which is the Mythic Invitational qualifier,
Gotcha.
which is the next round of that. And then if you do good in that, then you get to go to Worlds. So there was that previous path
Okay.
available within Arena, and you're saying that this is actually going to grant access not to the MIQ through just to the player tours.
I don't know. I don't remember it. So just putting it out there, though, that it is important to try to get up to the top 1,200.
Yeah,
Push your rank, boys.
I
Yeah,
do
yeah,
remember
Now,
this.
is
though.
that this month?
A lot
Yeah,
of the
it's
NPL
starting
players
this month.
aren't happy with it. I do know that. So
Yeah.
they're basically saying like, well, now anybody can essentially land where we have worked years to land, you know, which I can definitely understand that if you
That's
could.
the progression of society, though.
Yeah.
It
used to
also
take-
is what happens when you go online. You know, it's
Yep.
it's part of
It used
it.
to take people hundreds of years to amass $1 million within their family, you know, but now people are pulling this kind of money out, honestly, within a decade, some people. So just the way that society progresses exponentially, I get it. It used to require a lot more work and a lot harder work, but this way is good too. And honestly, the player pool was so limited by everybody who could take the day off work, could go travel for a week, right, to hit all these tournaments. That was really restrictive. So I know it's harder, but at the same time, it was easier because the talent pool wasn't as deep. Now we have this huge talent pool. All of these geniuses that were just locked in their basements are now, you know, online watching MTG Jeff and Dr. Spillikin getting their decks ready, right? So I think, you know, it's a grass is always greener on the other side of the fence situation.
Yeah, Lord,
Yeah,
I
no,
hope nobody's watching my stuff for competitive decks. You got the wrong guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's a part of the reason I think it's important to bring up why we care or why we're talking about the competitive side of things, because it is fun. It's interesting. At the same time, I have a lot of my viewers that are in the same boat where like they come to me for jank, you know, type of thing. It's not so much because of all the competitive stuff, everything like that. But it is at least worthwhile to note that you might want to keep your eye on it. You might want to build one competitive deck. These are some options that are out there, at least for the next little bit. I would recommend trying to go more rotation proof if you can, because rotation is coming. You know, if you're trying to put in resources to build a deck, yeah, if you really want to get to the top 1200, get into the actual events, make sure you're trying to compete, do it. Yeah, I think it's an awesome way to go.
And a little
But
side note,
be a
if
little
you're
careful
building
on
these
that.
competitive decks and you're a free-to-play player, take them into the little events for historic or
Yeah.
standard, whatever kind of deck or format you're playing, because you can just earn money that way and build out your collection, and it's a great way to test these decks as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the standard events, historic events, are definitely not played as often as they should be. It's a great way to grind out coinage.
So we're talking about hitting top 1200. Maybe for people who've not been there, obviously if people are there, they already probably know this information. But for the people who are interested in this information, are like, hey, I would love to play Magic at a more competitive level. What is reaching Mythic and the top 1200 within Mythic really entail? What's that going to mean for them? What's the time commitment? Are they going to be able to do it, with a tier 3, tier 2, tier 1.5, or is it only available for the tier 1 players? So let's maybe build a picture for everybody about what that's going to entail for them.
I think that if you're going free to play, pick up a deck similar to Azorius Flyers, Azorius Flyers, or something like that, like where it's just a budget kind of aggro to the ground. You're doing one thing, and that's bring the life total down with evasive creature, something like that. Azorius Flyers is a great, I would say tier 2 deck, maybe even down to tier 3. But what it does is it's one of those decks that will win you game 1. If you're playing a best of 3 type of matchup, and you bring that into best of 1, and all of a sudden these kinds of decks are so much stronger, so much better. They can actually compete with the mono red decks. They can do that kind of stuff. And so and that's why every time I post a free to play type of deck or rotation proof, anything like that, I've posted quite a few of these on my channel, where it's like, these are the kinds of decks. I get comments all the time like, hey, how do I get out of gold? How do I get out of platinum? These kinds of things. And it's honestly just by, first off, if you're having issues getting out of gold, I would say that make sure you're watching people play that are, that know what they're kind of doing, everything, the people that have done it, because that's one of the main ways to actually get to help you out there is you may be missing out on some of just typical gameplay style if you're still stuck in gold, because gold, the way that you progress, is still in your favor, even if you have I think even less than a 50% win rate. And so even if you're winning only 40% of your games, you should be getting out of gold as long as you're winning, as long as you're playing here and there. And so then it's just a matter of time putting it into it. So I would say, jump into watching other people play. If you're missing out on certain aspects of gameplay, things like that, watching others. I feel like I improved a lot by watching MTG Goldfish, CGB, Convert Go Blue. You guys, I've watched your stuff. Frick Six, all of the buddies that we have in this whole system that are just awesome to watch, is how to get out of that area. And then I would say just pick a deck that you're comfortable running that's good, and try to grind through platinum. Then once you hit diamond tier, you need to pick up a good deck. That's basically how it is. It's like by the time you hit diamond, you need to actually have a decent deck that is top tier or a smart tier 2 deck that kind of hits the meta of what you're playing up against, and then grind. I prefer, once I'm in diamond, to start playing best of 3, because then you only need 3 wins to get to the next rank. You can lose quite a few before you drop down to the next rank, and so all you have to have is 3 wins in a row. And you can do that every once in a while with a decent deck, where you have that 3 wins in a row. And so it's all about just trying to set up to where you have 3 wins in a row. All right, get to the next rank. All right, 3 wins in a row, get to the next rank. And that is where I feel like I've only gotten to Mythic three different seasons, because I'll get to diamond and I'm like, man, the grind is just, it's going to take me this amount of time and I just don't want to. I feel like we've all been there, where it's like, dang, that's going to be hard. But I know that I could anytime that I've put in the time. And so then and that's what we're trying to say, is that there is maybe a little bit more reason to be trying to put in the time, try to get into that competitive zone. It's fun to play up in that league. It's actually easier to win in Mythic than it is in Diamond, I feel like, and maybe even Platinum.
Yeah. So actually taking up the other side of this, if you're a control player and you enjoy the control decks, I'll kind of recommend the opposite and go play best of 3 just off the bat. You have things like Simic Flash, right, that are fairly inexpensive with Rewind. As much as we just bagged on Reclamation, Reclamation is only an uncommon, so it's real good. Simic Flash, even though we didn't see any of it in the tournament, the real Killer Dub, shout out to him, by the way, another Twitch streamer, he's in the top 200 right now with Simic Flash, and it's a very budget-friendly deck, and it's taking people by surprise because there's not a whole lot of them. So like we were talking about with the Mardu Winota, you can take these side decks like Azorius Flyers and all that. If you're going into best of one, yeah, you try to go for that aggro because you're going to catch people off guard, and that's your best tool, honestly, when you're a free-to-play player, is catching them off guard because they won't be expecting those commons or those uncommons that you took the time to search out. But if you're interested in control, I would recommend steering clear of best of one because you're going to get dominated by those people that are playing the aggro decks that have the rares and the mythics and all that make the aggro so strong. So you might want to actually not play that if you just keep losing to Embercleave and whatnot. Just take it a best of 3, build out a good solid sideboard, and try to average yourself. If you're seeing a whole lot of Bant ramp or control in general or team or rec or whatever, then sideboard appropriately. You can change up your sideboard, you can change up your main board. And that's the thing with Magic, is this isn't a game that changes once every 3 months. This is a game that changes every month, every week, as people realize new combos, better removal, better whatever, right? So you need to constantly be changing your deck. And the last major point I wanted to make was, anytime I go to play ranked, I just automatically don't count the first hour. So like, if you're going to play, put in that time, because the first hour I play, I'm just like, I'm sort of warming up, and you need that warm up to sort of fill out the meta for the day, see what people are playing, what's strong, all that good stuff. So what do y'all feel?
So I think the biggest part of it almost is going to come down to your awareness, and then having some strategy or a game plan. And you mentioned if you're going to play control, you should play best of 3. What if we preemptively predict that the majority of our games in best of 1 are against aggro? Now we can play our control, and we can mulligan, always looking for that shatter, looking for our Deafening Clarion, making sure that we immediately have our aggro killer in hand. So it go both ways potentially. I think personally for me, it's going to be easier to rank up in best of 3. However, if you are running some of these more budget decks, I think best of 1 is going to be a better bet, right? It's a lot easier to sideboard and absolutely destroy a budget deck in best of 3 than to realize, like Jeff said, Azorius Flyers is just coming out strong. Where did this come from, right? Left field.
It's also hard to have 50 more cards sometimes too. Like if you're playing free to play, having 15 extra cards that may be rare or whatever makes it difficult to play.
However, with that being said, obviously my ideal route is a tier 1 aggro deck in best of 3. That's my go-to. However, within the community, every single month we have people reaching Mythic with free-to-play decks in best of 1 and best of 3. And now this being said, free-to-play, for me, is 0 red, 0 mythics, but for each individual who's not a content creator, just making things that everybody can view, they're going to have their own rares based on their own collection. So it's not quite, it is free to play, but like it's an upgraded variant from it, right? So everybody's got, one Embercleave and a Torbrand at least, for example, right? So it's going to really up that power level and the consistency of those decks. And with what you have free to play, work towards a top tier deck, right? Don't be scared of best of 1. Another strategy I use, other than almost preemptively assuming that we're always playing against an aggro deck, is to trim a land. There's hand smoothing in best of 1. So if you're typically always running 24, and that deck is, say, a net deck that you found online with a sideboard that's meant for traditional standard best of 3, you're not doing that. Maybe trim a land and take one of those sideboard cards that you like a lot, put it in.
But what works in Arena is very different from what works in Paper as well. So if you're used to playing Paper or playing all that kind of stuff, and you follow the same exact rules for lands on that, Arena is different. Usually you can learn by trimming lands, and we're all nodding this because we've seen it so many times.
Don't ever use the
there is a difference going into best of 3, but at least in best of 1, you can definitely be trimming down lands a little bit more, that kind of stuff, because the shuffler is broken, a little bit, or the way that it creates starting hands. we don't have a ton of time here on this one today, and so I wanted to real quick touch on, because I'd mentioned it, some of the spoilers for Zendikar, a little bit of information about that. So Zendikar, Mark Rosewater, I think it was for the LA Comic-Con, they did like an at-home Comic-Con thing. He was able to talk about it. He went into quite a bit about some new Zendikar boosters that they're doing, which will you can potentially get up to 5 rares or mythics in one booster for like, I think it's going to be like $1 more. They haven't said how much more it's going to be. It's going to be a little bit more, but there's some pretty cool new boosters where they're saying like, you know what, not everyone opens boosters for drafts. Let's actually give them a product that's for just opening boosters. So I really like that. That was pretty cool. Apart from any of that stuff, because I know a lot of you guys don't necessarily play physical as much, but that's a good side there. He did talk a little bit about Zendikar Rising. He said that they are going back to Zendikar. That was his first kind of baby that he had. Mark, when he first jumped in, he had wanted this kind of lands matters type of set for quite a while. And he said that Zendikar Rising is going to be another lands matters type of set. We are going to have lands be a focus, as well as still have the adventure side of it that we've had it with Zendikar in the past. So really, really excited for this one. He did say that 3 mechanics will be coming back from previous Zendikar blocks or Zendikar sets. We don't know which ones those are. My guess is that I think that we see Landfall come back and potentially Kicker. We've seen Kicker that's already in Historic. I could see them pushing Kicker because we already have Kicker in Historic to be able to maybe add a little bit more value into some of those decks, because they have already kind of shown that. So those are the 2 of the 3 that I feel like would be coming back that I'm really excited for. Actually, Landfall was just awesome. I think that it's a really fun mechanic. I don't see them not doing it again. Maybe not for this set. Like I could see him waiting to another one in the future, but I'm hoping for Landfall and Kicker. Well, what about you guys? Are there any other mechanics from Zendikar that you'd be excited to see?
Well, just quick, Jeff, can you explain what Landfall and Kicker is, just for people that don't know?
Sorry, yeah. So Landfall is basically something happens when land falls. You know, land hits the battlefield, and it's almost like an ETB trigger, but for lands. And so that kind of effect where land hits, something's going to happen, and the range of what can happen is pretty phenomenal. Actually, like the different kinds of things that happen with landfall. That's why I talked about it a little bit vaguely, is because you probably see it quite a bit here and there in Commander. If you're playing Commander, that kind of stuff. There's enough good landfall decks that still come out here and there. Kicker is another one where basically as you go to cast a creature or whatever this is, spell, then you can pay an additional cost to have it do something else. If you look at Dominaria, I believe it was Dominaria, had Kicker as well in it. And so if you're playing Historic, you can go through and check out some of the Dominaria Kicker cards that are out there. We actually have a Kicker Lord. And this is part of the reason I'm hoping for Kicker, is because I forgot his name. He's in red green. He's Gruul, which is in my heart, and so I'm hoping for more Kicker cards to add to this guy. Anyway, yeah. So there's Kicker. Basically, they've had multi-Kicker in the past where you can kick multiple times. I'm not sure if we'd be seeing something like that, but I'm guessing just Kicker. You can pay a little bit more and have a Kicker cost that ends up having a secondary or an additional effect as you cast the card, which is nice, especially when there's so much stinking land in the format right now. If we're not getting Euroband, if we're not getting all this other stuff out of the format, then it might be fun to have some additional things to do with lands, it'll do with mana, to at least make it interesting.
So right now in our current booster packs, the mythic rare rate is 1 in 8. With Zendikar Rising, this is actually being adjusted. It's going to be 1 in 7.4. So we're going to have a slight increase with our mythic rare drops in Zendikar Rising and forward as we progress through our new set. So you should be expecting 0.04 more rares or 0.6 more rares.
Does that mean that they're just giving us more mythics though, and therefore it's just still going to be hard to get to them? Like I feel like that's what's happening here. Like I'm going to read between the lines a little bit and say that is why.
That could be. We don't actually have the total number of rares and mythics released yet. I think normally it's like 212 rares and 56 mythics.
Right.
Of course, with the ×4 of each, create that. So you could be right, but at the very least, at least they're balancing it for us, right? To keep that ratio the same at the very least. We get Jace and Nissa and Narari back, which is pretty cool. I'm not sure if we have copies of them yet, if they've been spoiled, but we do know that they, as characters at least, will be making a reappearance.
That's good. I always pull for Jace. He's like the planeswalker that I wish just worked. I mean, we have the 4 mana that's like mill yourself. Oh, cool, but a real Jace. I want a real Jace planeswalker. Damn it! I like the one that could create the illusions and all that, right?
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, that was a fun one. They have had such, like, I think one of the best cards ever printed was a Jace. I think Jace the Mind Sculptor way back when. And so maybe that's why they have kept Jace a little bit weaker. But I mean, you could have given some of the effects that Teferi has to a Jace instead. It feels like, like, because we've had so many Teferis be amazing for the last while that I'm with you. I'm fine with something else taking the stage a little bit here and there.
When I first started playing Teferi, I just couldn't stand it. I was like, how am I going to craft all these cards? They're so good. But now that I've had access to them for so long, I love my Teferi, bro. This guy is the best.
Teferi's awesome. It really is good. I mean, yeah, I still lean on the side of that it shouldn't be banned, or like there's a lot of these cards that people are saying, Uro, I still agree. I think is powerful, but shouldn't quite be banned. I would go for like Wilderness Reclamation before anything like that. Anyway, yeah, we that's a whole other discussion. But yeah,
Zendikar Rising is going to come out on Arena on September 17th. The tabletop release is the 18th to the 14th. They do that pre-release week, right? And then the launch party outside of the United States is the 26th to the 27th. And then Friday Night Magic outside the United States is the 25th to January 15th. That can't be right.
yeah, I think that I was seeing that the date for Arena was the 24th of September. But
the 25th is the organic release, and Arena comes out about like a week earlier or something, like a couple days for sure. So definitely here we see Magic Online and MTG Arena release September 17th. Just on the wiki.
Gotcha.
So little side thing while we're just talking about stuff happening in Magic. Did y'all ever see that Magic series that was supposed to be coming to Netflix, directed by the Russo brothers? Yeah. Apparently they had announced it like it was like a year ago. They announced it was supposed to be in the works and coming to Netflix, and yeah, I know, we got some things going on in the world to slow things down, but I gotta say, I hope they didn't scrap that project. I was really excited for it. There was like one tweet about it, and then that was it. It was just blipped off the map.
I think if there was only one tweet about it and blipped off the map, it might be off the map.
This year, I feel like it's hard to feel like I don't feel bad about anyone canceling stuff or changing things up. It is a bummer that it keeps happening, that kind of thing, but it's like, dude, this year has been a kick in the balls for everybody, to put it lightly. This has been a rough year, and so we definitely feel. Yeah, I think that's part of the reason that we focus so much on trying to make sure we're bringing good entertainment with this content, with everything here. Our hearts are going out to everyone that's with this second, third waves of everything going on with COVID, whatnot. I think just kind of just to add that here into this as well, is that our heart goes out to you. We do, I think, put a little bit more effort into our content for this exact reason, where we hope that we can be, at least something fun amidst all the crazy,
Yeah, fun, positivity, good vibes. Yeah. These 3 guys right here, boys.
Alrighty, well, any closing comments, thoughts on the Players Tour, on Zendikar, on Double Masters? I know we didn't touch on Double Masters, but that's not really our whole thing. Anything else I missed?
there is a tournament coming up soon for historic versus just standard. So if you haven't checked out historic yet, if you are free to play, of course it is difficult. We've talked about this in the past, but there are going to be more tournaments and stuff coming up for historic. So maybe be checking into some of those decks a little bit more, be looking into that meta. It is changing daily right now because there's so many new ways to go about it. I think we're still probably a month or two away from it settling down at all into like an actual meta, and then it'll change again. But I'm really excited. It's been really fun to watch and see where everything's going right now.
If you're not in diamond, don't waste your gold. Keep the gold on your collection. The percentage chance of you stringing together these 7 wins is like 0.003%. It's incredible. You're going to need not only to be very, very skilled with some of the best decks, but you're going to be rolling the luck dice as well on top of that within your matches. So if you don't have a ton of experience, I really suggest, because I think it's like 20,000 gold or something to enter the Historic Open. It's not cheap. So my heart would break if you guys went in there with big hopes. I'm going to win 30 of these historic packs or whatever they try to bait you in there with. Actually, I think they're doing money now. It's like $2,000.
Yeah, they did that last time too. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're a beginner, if you're not super confident in your win rate, you're not in diamond yet, right? You're platinum and below.
Yeah, no, I agree with HEG as he's frozen there for a little bit.
Benefiting you and your collection. It's an uphill battle, so we need to be making sure that we're able to pace ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the Arena Open, if you're not in Diamond or Mythic, it's not worth the money. I don't enter into this unless it's for content, like type of thing. Like I don't plan on winning these ones. Maybe I should actually try, but I do think that you should probably make sure that don't waste your money there. All right. Sorry, we made it through the entire stream before we had technical difficulties. Now we have a lot, but
oh yeah, I just was muted that whole time, huh?
Hey, if you stuck through this far and you're still laughing at us and everything like that, we appreciate you. Yeah, make sure that you guys check us out, podcasts wherever podcasts are. Basically, Dr. Spilkin is the bomb. He's the beast, and puts the stuff up everywhere. And amazing human being. Make sure you like. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you show your love. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one.
Peace out.
Take care, guys. Have a good day.